Right, this summer, researchers from the University of Michigan released the findings of one of the largest ever surveys on tinnitus. Tinnitus is a hearing problem that causes people to hear a ringing or other noises in their ears that other people around them can't hear. Now, of the 160,000 people who were surveyed, about 15% experienced tinnitus every day. And locally, an audiologist with Beltone Hearing Care Center in Davenport says this is a problem that's getting worse in the Quad Cities.
We are joined by Dr. Michael Sharp, an audiologist in the Quad Cities. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. First of all, there's some debate about how it's pronounced, if it's tinnitus or tinnitus, but can you try to explain to people what this is?
So it depends on where you're at in the country. We typically say tinnitus, and what it is the ringing in the ears that a person perceives that's not in the world around them. So a lot of times it comes from, for the temporary version, it comes from just being exposed to loud noises. So yard work, power tools, going to a loud concert, things like that. And that you hear ringing for a day or two, it goes away, and that causes a really small amount of hearing damage. Over many years, that can compound, and the small amount of hearing damage becomes a larger amount of hearing damage. And then at that point, that's when people will say, now I hear it all the time.
Is this something that you've always seen? Are you seeing more of now?
So we had seen it in the past, especially when there was a lot of folks who had jobs that with a lot of noise exposure and there wasn't a lot of regulation around wearing hearing protection. Well, nowadays, because of, we have wonderful things in the Quad Cities, lots of concerts to go to, things like that, we're starting to see a little bit more of it. And especially nowadays, there's such a wide use of Bluetooth earbuds, things like that, where people are listening to music, which is great. I'm a music fan myself, but we have to be careful about how loud we're listening to it. Because again, those little noise exposures that cause that little bit of ringing in the ears can compound over time.
So, can you put this into perspective for us? Let's take even like 10 years ago. How many people would you see come in with this versus now?
So in the 10 years ago, or maybe even like 15, 20 years ago, when Apple first came out with the iPod, we started to see a little bit more because at the time you could turn it up so loud that people were actually giving themselves significant noise exposure. Nowadays, we are starting to see it more because it's sort of headphone manufacturers are kind of getting into a game of how loud can they go. So that's why you see lots of different versions, whether they're earbuds, the new big over-the-ear headphones that then people like to really crank up and listen to their music. Well, we're starting to see more and more people say they're getting this ringing and it's not going away.
So, what's the solution here? Is it simply turn your music down?
So that is one, but if you like the satisfaction of really cranking up the volume, a lot of the manufacturers of phones, especially Apple, have actually a hearing health menu within the phone, and it'll be limited by decibel level. So to give you an example, if you listen to your music at about 100 decibels, that's the limit on your phone, you only have to listen for about 15 to 30 minutes before you start causing damage to your hearing. So you can turn that down a little bit within the phone and you can still have the satisfaction of cranking the volume all the way up. But a lot of other things, for example, preventative measures would be things like if you're going to a concert, wearing hearing protection, if you're going to use power tools, mow the lawn, things like that that cause a lot of noise. And if you get that little bit of ringing afterward, then the important thing is to make sure to cover up those ears and make sure you don't get that noise causing damage.
Because what is the consequences that we're talking about here? I mean, it's easy to say you might have hearing loss down the road, but is it
Mhm.
down the road and how serious is it?
Well, it depends on the exposure. And a lot of times now, because there are people who love to listen to their music so loud, they can cause hearing damage in a relatively short period of time. Because every time you give yourself that feeling of ringing that then goes away, you've caused damage. And the more you do that to yourself, the faster that permanent damage and long-term hearing loss becomes a realization.
When you say permanent damage, there is no, for lack of a better term, there is no cure or way to fix that.
Correct. And a lot of times for people who perceive tinnitus all day long, it's every day for them, it's usually as a result of having noise exposure in some form of hearing loss. To kind of put it in a basic way, it's sort of because you no longer have that sense of hearing, your brain is now filling in the blank of information it's not getting anymore. And so if we discover of an important first step, if you have that ringing, is to get a hearing test. And what we do is we test your hearing, and then we start to see that, oh, there is a treatable hearing loss. And by virtue of treating the hearing loss, we can help reduce the perception of that tinnitus sound if it's something that is bothersome and every day.
Dr. Sharp, thank you so much for your time and for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
And Dr. Sharp says if you're at the point where you're hearing ringing every day or most days, it is time to schedule an appointment to see an audiologist. All right, if you want to share this story, we have an online article up on our website under the As Seen on TV tab.